Dear Reddit, when you're lying in bed at night, do you ever randomly remember some relatively minor social missteps or poorly chosen words you did or said years earlier, and then beat yourself up over it even though it really wasn't a big deal? If so, what happened? So, I'll share my story. Back in second grade, one of my close friends was in that class, and he sat in a desk across the aisle from me to my left. And I remember one day I was looking at him and I had to sneeze really badly. And in my moronic second grader brain, I thought to myself, he's my friend. I like my friend. I don't want to sneeze on my friend. I should sneeze in the opposite direction. So I turned my head to my right and and sneeze all over the girl sitting right next to me. So I don't know why I didn't sneeze in my hands or sneeze in front of me because there wasn't anyone in front of me, or to my left because there was an empty aisle to my left. No, instead I sneeze in the worst possible direction, right into the face of this poor little girl, and she screamed, "Ew!" That's my most embarrassing moment. So how about you? Let me hear from you down in the comments. What is your most embarrassing moment that keeps you up at night? In 7th grade, a cute girl asked me to sit next to her. I said, my mom won't let me sit next to girls. My mom said no such thing. If you said cute girls, you'd have been a total baller. So close. I accidentally mixed up an inside joke with the wrong friend group with disastrous results. Friend group number 1. The joke was when someone calls and asks who's all there, we would add Daryl to the list of names. Daryl wasn't a real person. The joke wasn't really funny and made no sense out of context, but I guess that's why it was an inside joke. Friend group number 2. I was hanging out playing some drinking games with a bunch of people that I hadn't hung out with in a while. It was kind of a get-together to remember a friend that they had who had recently died in a car accident. I didn't know him that well, but I was always down to party. Anyway, the phone rings, and the person who answered started listing off names. Sorting my cards for another rounds of presidents and buttholes, I offhandedly said, heh, and Daryl. It was the typical record scratch moment where everyone stopped and looked at me. Daryl was the name of the friend who had just died. This happened in 2002, and I still think about it all the time. Then, we have a similar inside joke story down below. Oh man, I have a mixed up inside joke scenario. It wasn't me, it was my neighbor. My neighbor is morbidly obese and my mom is Korean, and they joke with each other about it. My neighbor makes racist comments to my mom, she makes fun of my neighbor's weight. It's just part of their friendship. They often did it in public too, but it was always obvious when they were standing next to each other that it was an inside joke. At one point, my neighbor was out with her husband, they're both white. She was at a checkout counter when she blithely remarked about all the dang Koreans taking over the region. The checkout lady just stares at her. Then the husband leaned over and said, "It's not as funny when OP's mom isn't standing next to you." Cue my horrified neighbor desperately trying to explain that she wasn't a racist, that it's an inside joke. My friend is Korean. Which, of course, just made her look worse. My mom lost it when she heard the story. When I was in 5th grade, our teacher said a joke in front of the class and everyone laughed, including myself. After the laughter died down, a girl looked up at me and said, "You have a really disgusting laugh, ew." I became so self-conscious about laughter since that specific day, and after years, I have trouble actually laughing. My brain kinda made it a habit to just smile or slightly chuckle at something, even if it's really funny. OP, on this channel, I have a policy against cursing. That being said, that girl sounds like a total bitch. I went through a phase where I scolded people for reading Harry Potter because my parents told me it was evil. Lots of awkward situations because of that. Junior prom, I blurted out during dinner to my date, "I'm so bored." And I have no idea why it came out of my mouth. I'm pretty well mannered and quiet. I forget how I tried to play it off, but I felt so bad. You think that's bad? Sweet cupping cakes has got you beat. I was sitting in a small group of friends in school, and my crush, literally the love of my life at that point, admitted she liked me. It was the happiest moment of my entire life. So naturally I said, ew, in front of everyone. This was second grade, and I still think about it weekly. And then Mayor Scotch follows up. My friend in second grade made fun of me for liking a girl. He is now married to said girl. Well, joke's on him, Mayor Scotch. Now he's the one with the cooties. For most of my education, I went to public school, and like most kids, I was socially awkward. For high school, I received an academic scholarship to a private Catholic school. It was a really big deal for my family. I didn't know anyone at the new school. Between an odd combination of academics, sports, and the tail end of puberty, I became very popular in this new school. I wasn't used to the attention, and it definitely got to my teenage head. Nearly all of my social circles became around the new school and not with my old local friends. In my junior year, I head to a McDonald's for lunch with a few friends from the new school. Working the counter, I see a girl who I used to go to public school with that I used to have a crush on. She just lit up when she saw me. She was so excited. And I was a sucky teenager, and I just ignored her. I pretended I didn't recognize her. She looked so deflated when I didn't acknowledge her. Note, this was in the 90s. My family moved a few times after that. I settled down in a different part of the country after university. I never made it back to that town. I've relived that butthole moment for years now. Fast forward to one of those nights when I relived that moment, and I decided to look her up on Facebook to apologize. I found out she died 10 years ago in an auto accident. Since I found out her fate, I feel even more awful about that moment. See, this is why it's always a good idea to be nice to people. You never know when someone's gonna die randomly, and then you're gonna stuck being a butthole for the rest of your life. When I was 11, it was my first day at a new school, and all the other students were also new. The math teacher started our first class by asking each of us about our education background, what school we came from, what they taught us in our last year's math class, etc. Just trying to get a general idea of what kind of students he was dealing with. Thing is, I was so nervous that I spaced out for a bit and got lost in my overthinking mind. So I didn't hear the teacher's questions to my classmates. When it got to my turn, the teacher just said, "Now tell me about you," assuming I understood what kind of information he was expecting. I just went straight into a monologue that started with, "So I was born in the south zone of the city, but my mom decided to move to our current neighborhood a few months ago after divorcing my dad," and went on, giving some very specific details about my short life. Everyone had a really confused look on their faces, and as soon as I realized the teacher was also completely lost, I stopped talking and went instantly red. The teacher then said, "That's all really great, but I was only interested in what happened last year, not in the last 10, and everyone started laughing. Next day, nobody remembered it anymore, but 12 years later, it still comes to mind in pretty random moments. Well, good news, OP. Now your most embarrassing moment has been immortalized on a YouTube video. Freshman year of high school. It was one of those days before school starts and you meet your teacher and your parents are there. My teacher was handing me a piece of paper and I didn't see the paper, so I shook his hand. He said, "Oh," and my mom said, and I panicked and said, "I just wanted to be polite." So I still want to die when I think of that. Bruh, I can't even begin to pinpoint one event. I guess one thing is when I was 11, I asked my teacher if I could go to the bathroom 3 times during class and told me no. And, well, sure enough, I couldn't hold it any longer, and there's bullying for the next 6 months. Literally shakes me in bed about how I've never felt that low before. Somehow, I managed to live through it though, lol. We all got flaws. Mine is a bladder that urinates prematurely. OMFG, this gave me flashbacks all the way to 1st grade. I was the quietest child. I listened intently. I never strayed from my teachers. Well, one day in music class, I had to piss while we were all still singing. I figured, I'll hold it, it'll be okay. I couldn't. It got bad, fast. It took up so much courage, but I finally raised my hand. The teacher called on me and I said in the most sheepish voice, "Can I please go to the bathroom?" She said no. I decided I'd try to hold it out longer. My parents told me to tell someone when it was an emergency should I be in that situation though. Finally, I was about ready to burst. I raised my hand again. I was doing that piss dance kids do. I say with so much desperation, "Please, teacher, it's an emergency. I need to go." She says, "No, there's only 10 minutes left. You can wait." Pissed myself 2 seconds later. I didn't know it back then, but I see that how I was treated by that teacher now. I was 7. I needed to pee. I was visiting Portland for a wedding that lined up with my birthday as well. We went out to celebrate and finished that night at a karaoke bar. Realizing I'm too drunk to sing, I picked My Name is Eminem as my song to perform. There's 2 versions of that song. One is the original release, the other tamed down, which you mostly hear today. The woman controlling the music put on the original, and off I went. One of the lines at the end is, "Running over lesbians in a spaceship while they screaming at me, 'Let's just be friends.'" I finished the song, and I'm met by applause from my friends and one other table. The rest of the place is silent. The DJ goes, "Nice job. Don't know if it was the best choice for a gay women's night though." And at that moment, I wanted to leave my skin. I was in 4th grade and it was Valentine's Day. I was the new kid in school and this one boy had been picking on me all year. My 10-year-old self was very non-confrontational, so I wrote a paragraph on the back of his Nerd's Valentine explaining that I don't like it when he's mean to me, and I don't understand why he has to be. He couldn't read my handwriting and brought it to the teacher, who made me read it aloud to both of them. I think about that every day of my life. He even ended up finding me online and contacting me to apologize a few years ago, but all I can think of is the cringe. OP, you lie awake thinking about this moment, but it sounds like the bully was also lying awake thinking about this moment. Kinda poetic, actually. When I was in the 4th grade, I lived in the middle of nowhere and there was practically no minorities, just white county people. This Mexican family had just moved in and could barely speak any English, and I befriended one of the kids my age in school. He came over to my place, and we were both joking around about his bad English, just doing what kids do. I would pretend to speak with his accent, and then he would copy mine, and it was silly, stupid, and innocent. My mom told me I was being really inconsiderate and how uncool it was to make fun of someone for not being able to speak English. I felt terrible. The next day at school, my friend came up to me and started joking with me again, but I just shook my head and looked down at my desk in embarrassment. He had no idea what was wrong, and I was too young and dumb to be able to explain my behavior to him. As I grew older, I spent probably 20 years thinking about that day and how much of a turd I was to be friendly one day and then without explaining anything, just stop talking to him out of embarrassment. I felt really bad about it for a long time and often laid awake at night thinking about it. I ended up finding him on Facebook about a year ago, and we friended each other, so I told him how bad I felt about it and apologized. He just laughed it off and said it was no big deal and he was still really thankful to find someone as friendly as me when he didn't know anyone here. He said he figured my mom had said something to me about it and it never bothered him. I don't know if maybe he was just being nice to me or not, but it was such a relief to hear it. It really felt like a weight had been lifted off of me. Well, I'm glad at least one of these stories has a happy ending. This happened back when I was in 6th or 7th grade. Me and a couple of friends were browsing the neighborhood our school was in after the school day was over. We happened on a bus stop with a couple of girls seemingly our age. We stopped and tried to chat them up, but their bus came soon after and they had to go. We see their bus stop at a traffic light not 20 meters away and one of us says, "Let's run to the next stop." Nobody thought to ask, "Then what?" And off we were, sprinting madly behind the bus. Surprisingly enough, we somehow made it to the next stop just as the bus was arriving. Then the doors opened, the girls sat there giggling, and we did nothing. Literally. I even remember it like the bus driver held the doors a bit longer, but I might be imagining it as the memory is so old. We just sat there trying to catch our breaths as my lungs burned. And then the doors closed and the bus went off to the next stop, and none of us said anything. We just walked it off, went on to the next stupid thing we would do. I don't know about any of the other guys, but this still haunts me as one of the cringiest moments of my life so far. In 7th grade, 2006 for me, I had just started watching more anime on Toonami and was really into it. One day, we had to do a paper describing ourselves coming back from summer break, and the class had to put a person to the description. I named my favorite jacket that I wore every day Takeshi for F knows why. And the cutest new girl in class read my description out loud. And in it, I described the love for my jacket and how I had named it what it was. The cute girl looks weirded out, stares at the class and goes, "What weirdo names their jacket?" Once no one guessed who it was, I piped up and said, "Well, maybe they aren't here today," trying to cover myself. My stupid self forgot, though, that this was an in-class assignment. And the teacher said, "No, it had to have been written by someone here." Finally, one of my friends goes, "Hey, OP, aren't you like the only one in class who plays soccer?" Also written in my description. I sunk in my seat as we moved on to the next description. I wake up sweating, feeling that jacket still on my shoulders. What really bothers me here isn't OP's cringe or the little girl being rude. What bothers me here is the teacher. What teacher hears the cute girl insult someone anonymously in class and then is like, who could that student who she insulted be? Clearly they must be in the class because this was an in-class assignment. Let's figure this out together, shall we? What a jerk-faced teacher. I was in 5th grade or so, and I was sitting in class with a couple classmates. We were talking about Weird Al songs we liked. This one girl asked, "Have you ever heard some Weird Al song?" And I followed with, "Have you ever heard I'm So Sick of You?" Which I guess they hadn't heard because she looked immediately down at the desk, sort of somber, and the dude did a little ho-ho, as if I did a nice burn. I guess they thought I was telling this girl I was so sick of her. I had no clue at the time though, so I just let it ride. Still feel bad about that one. You reminded me of a similar situation for me, except I meant it. A girl my buddy had given my number to wouldn't leave me alone. Calls at all hours, follows me in the halls, tries to sit with me at lunch. I blocked her number and avoided her at all costs. One day at lunch she sees me, beams at me, and makes a beeline right for me. I'm with all my buddies and she stands there looking at me and waiting for me to ask her to sit down. Instead, the first thing to pop into my head was to grab a quarter in my pocket, stand up, show it to her, and at the top of my voice yell, "Here's a quarter, go buy yourself some friends." I then bounce it off the table at her and it hits her square in the forehead. And all she does is stand there while the entire lunchroom explodes in laughter. She runs out with tears streaming down her face. I calmly sit down and continue eating. It was so out of character for me, skinny, introverted band nerd, that it was the talk of the school for weeks about how brutal that was. I still think about it and it's been 25 years. OP, that was savage, but it kind of sounds like something out of a movie. Yeah, you bounced that quarter straight into her forehead? In 8th grade, I farted once, and a few minutes later, someone smelled it and asked who did it. They asked if it was me, and I just started crying. I used to be very sensitive, and so I thought they were accusing me and felt really bad, so I cried. It's partially because of that I am now much less emotional and tend to keep my emotions bottled up. Maybe you should keep your farts bottled up too. 4th grade classroom. We were having a face-off between students on who could name the capital of whichever state our teacher named. I had been on a roll, getting a few correct in a row. Then the teacher says Kentucky. With all the enthusiasm and seriousness in the world, I screamed, "Frank Fart!" Everyone was dying laughing except for me at the time. Looking back, it cracks me up that I was so upset about it. That was r/Askreddit, and I want to hear your embarrassing story that keeps you up at night. So be sure to post your story down in the comments.